Hi, and welcome to this module on coaching as a leadership style. This module is going to go through and understand how we can actually take the coaching approach and use it as a leadership style within EYP. So for this module, there's going to be in 5 parts. First of all, I'm going to discuss a bit about leadership. What is leadership? What isn't leadership? And why is this important? Second of all, we're going to go into what is coaching, so a basic introduction to the fundamentals of coaching, explaining what is this approach that we keep hearing so much about. And then number 3, we're going to have a look at the 3 P's, so product, process, people. We're going to see how coaching fits in within these 3 and how maybe coaching can give us a different perspective of these 3 for us in EYP as well. Fourth, we're going to have a look at coaching versus mentoring. Because in EYP, we tend to mentor, and we're going to kind of go through and say what are the pros and cons of mentoring versus coaching, and have a few examples to really understand what is the difference between these two. And then finally, we're going to have a look at the case for coaching within EYP, because this whole module is about trying to introduce coaching as a leadership approach to EYP. So then I'm going to be arguing what are the real benefits of using this approach instead of using mentoring. So to begin with, leadership. If we want to use coaching as a leadership style, we first have to understand what leadership is. Now, starting with more of the academia. Within academia, we always start to define what something is before doing anything else about it. Now, leadership, just as many other concepts, has probably more definitions than there are authors writing about it. Not everyone agrees on exactly what leadership is. However, there are 4 main points that most definitions do follow. First of all, they say it's a process. It's not something that just happens at one moment. It's not something that just in the past or just in the future. It's a continuous process. It's something that happens. Second of all, it's always within a group setting. Leadership isn't something you can do just on an individual basis by yourself in your room, for example. It's something within this social sphere. It's about influencing others through motivation. It's influence through motivation. So it's not influencing people through coercion. It's motivation. It's getting people to want to do something. And it's all due to goal attainment. This is what people are aiming for, is goal attainment within leadership. So these 4 elements put together is that leadership is a process within a group setting in which people are influenced to be motivated to attain certain goals. So this is what the academics more or less agree on what leadership is. One thing that they also more or less agree is what leadership isn't. Now, what leadership definitely is not is coercion. So on the one hand, let's say we're in a session and I want to get you to do something. I can force you to do it, and I can say, if you don't do it, I will kick you out of the session. This is coercion. This isn't motivation. Motivation is making you want to do something. And when I make you want to do something, then you go out and perform it. This is what we call leadership. Another thing that leadership isn't is management. There is a big difference between leadership and management that is discussed a lot in the literature. On the one hand, leadership is more this kind of person with this approach taking an overall global vision, wanting to reach certain goals, etc. Looking at the long-term goals, thinking of the greater consequences of stuff. Whereas management is what we call the small implementations of things. For example, in a session, you may have let's say a session president who kind of sets out, this is what we really want to obtain in this session. And then maybe you have the vice presidents who say, okay, and they will actually implement this by working with the chairpersons, by verifying things. Leadership isn't this micromanagement of things. Instead, it's this overall motivation to achieve these goals. So, what is coaching? Well, coaching is a relatively new process. It's been around for the past, let's say, 25, maybe 26 years. In the early 2000s, there was the first international conference taking place in Switzerland on coaching. So it's a relatively new process, but it's becoming an extremely, extremely popular one because more and more big companies are taking on coaching and training, and they're realizing that when they bring their senior managers, etc., through coaching processes, then the productivity increases just tremendous amounts. For example, I recently read a paper arguing the business case for coaching, and they said that they looked at 5 top companies in the UK who brought in coaching with training and combined them together, and they saw an average of 82% increase in productivity. Now, this is amazing. So this is why there's this current big fuss about coaching. That is a really great way to make people develop on a personal level and also on a group level. So what is coaching? Well, coaching is just a way of encouraging and supporting someone to achieve either a goal, either to develop, or to acquire a skill. So these are the 3 things that coaching can focus on. You have an ambition you want to aim for, coaching can help you. Let's say you have a skill you want to develop, coaching can help you. Let's say there's a skill that you don't have, but you need to acquire. Same thing, we can use coaching to be able to acquire the skill. It's a very, very specific way of acquiring these skills. It's got one main principle behind it. Unlike anything else, what it does is coaching believes that you have all of the knowledge and I don't need to give you any of it. This is the very specific thing about coaching, which makes it very different from anything else. Is when you're working with someone, your coachee, your chairperson, for example, you believe that they already have all the knowledge needed. You don't need to give them any. You just need to use other tools, other methods to be able to get the knowledge from them. So this is coaching. And how do we get this knowledge from them? We use a variety of different tools. And these ones will be in different videos afterwards that you can look through and understand how to use these tools effectively. First one is deep listening. This is a very different way of listening compared to our superficial or active listening that we use on a day-to-day basis. Deep listening is how coaches can really, really engage with their clients and make sure their clients can actually have the time to think and can actually produce the knowledge that they didn't know that they had. Appreciative inquiry. Always look at things on a positive perspective. When you see a negative, a coach will take it, turn it into a positive, and focus on the future. This is appreciative inquiry. This is a tool we often use. A non-judgmental atmosphere. Now, coaches do not judge. We do not judge our clients. We don't judge anyone we're working with. And we need to make sure that they understand that they're not being judged, that we can build this trust and they can open up and we can work together well. Reflecting ideas and issues. Now, coaches work as a sounding board. So the coachee will be saying certain things, and then the coach is here to reflect it, to make sure the coachee is aware of what they're saying, how they're saying it, etc. We are nothing but a mirror when we're discussing with them. And also using open questions. Now, we always tend to use closed questions because we're trying to confirm ourselves somewhere. We're trying to get somewhere with someone within a conversation, etc. And instead, within coaching, we always leave things open. We don't decide the direction. Instead, it's the coachee who decides the direction. So this is a brief introduction to coaching. And if you would like to find more information about each of these tools, there are other videos afterwards. So we've currently covered what leadership is, what coaching is, and now we're actually going to place coaching within the 3 Ps to try to find out a little bit more about coaching. So these are the 3 Ps that we're probably all very familiar with. Up top here we have product, we have people, and we have process. Now, in EYP we like to have lots of discussions on which one do we think is most important when we chair a committee, when we work with a team, etc. And now I'm about to place coaching within this triangle so we can actually understand it a bit more with a tool that we're quite familiar with. So coaching places product as its highest priority. However, coaching understands product in a way we don't necessarily understand it in EYP. Because for coaching, product could be the development of a soft skill. It's whatever outcome we are aiming for. So for example, there's a chairperson and they want to get better with certain communication skills or certain social skills or certain leadership skills. Whatever they want to improve, this is a product. And coaching says, okay, this is what we're going to focus on with this person. And in order to obtain this, we know that we're going to use the coaching approach, which is a process, and we're going to work very individual with the person in order to obtain the product. So of course, coaching sees all 3 as vital elements, but the one it places above all of them is the product. because coaching sees the product as being the height of importance. Now, let me give you a bit of example to try to understand why product is so important. Let's say within EYP, if we're saying that the important thing is that a delegate can learn how to communicate their ideas effectively. If we focus, for example, too much on the resolution, if we focus only on the quality of the resolution at the end, we're not going to be obtaining our product. So we've put too much of an emphasis on a different product. But when we try to understand what is the product we really want to achieve, then we can design and use the correct process. So use our focus, what we really want to work on and how we work on it. And we can decide how close we want to work with the people. Do we want to work on an individual basis? Do we just provide them with structure and then people take care of themselves? Now, this is something you will only know once you understand your product truly. So hopefully this different vision on what a product is and how coaching fits within the 3 Ps not only gets you to understand coaching better, but maybe it's got you to think about the 3 Ps in a slightly different way within EYP as well. So now we've discussed what leadership is, what coaching is, we've defined it within the 3 Ps. We're now going to understand what coaching is further by seeing what we do in EYP, which is mentoring, and we're going to contrast it to mentoring. Mentoring is something we do in EYP a lot, and that has been done in the business world for hundreds and hundreds of years. Mentoring, for example, let's say a vice president or a president tends to mentor a chairperson a lot. So a mentor would advise and suggest things. A chairperson comes to you with a problem, you'd give them some advice, you'd suggest something, you would make a judgment upon what they're doing. Lead by example, you'd show them how things are done. You would normally be more experienced yourself. For example, a vice president or a president obviously has lots of chairing experience to be able to help the chairs. This is what we think in terms of mentoring. We tend to give lots of examples. When we're discussing with a chairperson, we'd say, okay, in a previous session, I had this that happened, and we kind of talk them through maybe this way quite a lot. And we tend to share a lot of knowledge with them. So this is mentoring. This is really great if you're working with somebody who doesn't have the knowledge and you need to bring them up to scrap with the knowledge and bring them through a task. Mentoring is done a lot, and it can really help things get done at the end of the day. However, it's not necessarily best in terms of personal development of the individual. Whereas within mentoring you would advise and suggest something, within coaching you create space for the other person to think. You don't advise and you don't suggest, you just create space. Instead of judging what they're doing and trying to form an opinion on it, you remain non-judgmental. You create a non-judgmental atmosphere for the pair of you to be able to work together. Instead of leading by example, you give the other person ownership of what they do. For example, you would never ever take over their committee if you're coaching. Instead of you having to be more experienced, you're just good in coaching. You have this knowledge on how to coach. While a mentor gives lots of examples, a coach would always ask the other person for examples. When something's going wrong, they'd ask the coach, can you give me an example when something went right? You would always get examples out of them rather than from yourself. And in terms of sharing knowledge, instead of trying to share the knowledge you have, you would focus on their knowledge as a coach and you try to challenge this knowledge. For example, if somebody comes to you and says, my co-chair doesn't listen to me. Now you're going to be challenging this idea that the chairperson has of it's the other person's fault. They've straight away put the blame on the other person. So you want to try to investigate and get them to think about, okay, what's happening? And there are all different really cool tools that we can use in order for them to better understand what is happening with their relationship with their other chairperson. And this is what we're doing, is we're challenging their beliefs and we're challenging their ideas. And so it's like the big differences between coaching and mentoring. And like through these examples, you can kind of see where coaching isn't something we really do in EYP. Instead, we tend to mentor. But there's so much good personal development that we can get from coaching. Now, to better understand this differences between coaching and mentoring, I'm going to actually give a couple of examples within EYP. So in this first example, I'm going to have a hypothetical discussion as, let's say, a vice president with a chairperson when the chairperson comes with a problem. And I'll start by taking a mentor perspective, and then I'll do the same thing again through a coaching perspective. And this way you can see how these two different approaches really do something different in terms of this relationship. So first of all, A chairperson comes up to me and says, Nathan, I don't feel confident about committee work tomorrow. As the vice president, I would say to them, okay, well, my first task is to kind of reassure them. So I'll say, I saw that during the training that you had really great ideas and that you really took in the knowledge and the things that you said at the end. I could really tell that you are prepared for committee work. Maybe you just don't believe in yourself just yet because let's say you haven't done committee work before, but I really believe that you're going to do well. So we kind of reassure them and then we give them some advice and suggestions. You could say, yesterday, during the training, we gave you a few different guides, different material and stuff like this. Do you have them with you? Okay, well you can go through and you can use this and this method, like this would reassure you. If you just stick to, let's say, adaptive method instead of trying Disney or something like this, you'd be a lot more reassured. Maybe you could try X, Y, Z. So we're giving them lots of advice, lots of suggestions, and then maybe asking them for a couple of questions to figure out more what is their problem in terms of their lack of confidence for the next day. So this is how we would do as a mentor approach. This is what we tend to do almost all the time in EYP. Now, a coaching approach would be very different. As a coach, if a chairperson came up to me, I'm their vice president, let's say they're in my buddy group, they would come up to me and say, Nathan, I don't feel confident about chairing committee work tomorrow. I'd say, okay, no problem. When was the last time you felt confident in an EYP session? And then have a think about it. They'd say, well, it was my, let's say, last session in this place. Let's say it was my last session, I was in Portugal, and it was actually just before committee work. I was chairing over there, I felt really confident. I said, okay, perfect. What do you think made you feel confident over there? And they would think about it. They say, well, I felt really academically prepared, and I felt I had lots of support from my team. And I had already been discussing with the delegates online, and they all seemed really prepared. So I think I just felt sure that they were prepared. Then I could ask them, for example, okay, and then knowing that they were prepared, how did this enhance your ability to chair? And then think about it a bit more, and they start to realise why they actually appreciate preparedness and how that helped their confidence. And then maybe I could ask them, okay, do you see any differences with this session? And then start to reflect upon how prepared they are, how prepared do they view their delegates, etc. And then once they start to find the issue, you can then start to ask them, okay, well, what do you think you could do in order for this no longer to be a problem? And then start to come up with certain ideas, and you can take one of these ideas and we can work on it a bit more. And then once they've worked on their idea, you could ask them, okay, and what would you like for me to do in order to help you with this? And they can actually think about, okay, what do they need from you? So what do you need from the chairs team, or what do you need in terms of support? And they just really kind of think it out, and they will actually gather a really good idea, a really good plan, and to be able to work on it efficiently. Now what's happened here is that as a vice president, I didn't give them any knowledge, I didn't give them any advice. Instead, I gave them the space and the structure to be able to think within, and they focused on their own strengths in order to solve the problem. So this is the big difference between coaching and mentoring within EYP in this approach. And now finally, is coaching better than mentoring? I said at the beginning of this video that I was going to state a case for coaching within EYP. But I think it's also important to try to understand is what I'm saying that coaching is always better than mentoring? Well, I'd like to first of all say that no. Coaching is a tool that we can use at certain times to achieve certain ends. Mentoring is a different tool we can use at other times to achieve other ends. With mentoring, we tend to have a lot of knowledge sharing. When one person doesn't have much knowledge within an area, if I took a delegate, put them as a vice president, and coach them, I wouldn't get that much out of them because they don't have this knowledge, they don't have this experience. However, if I took a third or fourth time chairperson and started to mentor them in chairing, maybe they're not going to gain that much from it. Maybe coaching, they could gain so much more. So these are different tools to use at different times. This video has really explored more coaching rather than mentoring, since mentoring is something we do almost intuitively in EYP. What is the benefits of coaching? Now, coaching can be amazing because it empowers the other individual. It doesn't say that I'm you're superior, I have the knowledge, this is what you should do. Instead it says, I'm here to work with you and I think you're going to do great and I'm going to help you develop. This is what coaching does. And so in EYP we really focus on personal development. So because we focus on personal development, empowering an individual with all their choices can really, really help. I've actually had in many sessions after coaching certain chairpersons, they come up to me and they said, I've never had so much space to actually think about my personal development before. I only think about the others, not necessarily myself in this environment. So it can really, really help them like that. Second of all, it gives better tailored choices. Now you, let's say as a board member, are a certain individual with certain preferences, certain personality, you like to do certain things, you have certain experience, so the choices that are best for you are very limited of what you want to do. Now, knowing that you have certain preferences, certain personality, etc., how can you take someone else who has a different personality, different preferences, etc., and tell them what is best for them? This is so incompatible that we can't actually do such a thing. So instead, with coaching, it allows them to create options or tasks or action plans, etc., that are best suited for their preferences, for the way they like to work, etc. So since they have something that's tailored to them, the result can be a lot more effective. Maybe if I'm asking you, okay, I think that you should actually try Disney method here and try XYZ. Maybe they're going to try to implement it, but the way they work is just incompatible with it. So this is why coaching can be really great. Another thing is commitment. If I ask you to do something, you're not going to be as committed to do something as if you asked yourself to do it. This is why we get delegates to write their own golden rules. And during debriefing, we get delegates to say lessons that they need to do themselves, rather than the chairperson saying, you need to adhere to this rule, and you have learnt this and that. If the other individual comes out with the answer, we tend to have a lot more commitment. Whereas with mentoring, when we're telling them to do things, they won't be as committed. And if not as committed and passionate in what they're doing, maybe the result will be suboptimal. And also, the very last thing I like to re-emphasize on is the development. I said it before, but it is so important. Coaching really, really enhances personal development because coaching singles out goals, it singles out achievements. And using this approach when we're discussing with people, they start to realize what is actually important to me and they will focus on those things. Whereas in mentoring, we kind of leave that stuff aside. So this is an overview on how we can use coaching as a leadership style within EYP. There are other videos that you can follow after this one, which will talk about the different tools and the different aspects you can do more in depth to give you a better overview and better knowledge on how to exactly apply this within EYP.